The storm battered the tall windows of the estate, rain smearing the glass like frantic hands trying to claw their way in. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the ceiling beams of the grand, empty home. Claire Whitmore stood in the middle of her marble hallway, clutching her phone with whitening knuckles. "I don't care what time it is. Send someone. Now," she said into the receiver. Her voice was tight, teetering between control and desperation. The dispatcher mumbled about emergency, coverage delays, something about power lines down due to the storm. But Claire had already ended the call. As she lowered the phone, the last light above her flickered, once, twice, and then died. The mansion sank into silence. Total, suffocating darkness. A gust of wind rattled the windows again, and Claire's breath hitched. Her chest rose and fell in panicked rhythm as the walls around her seemed to close in. Her tall, slender frame trembled. Sweat clung to the strands of her pale blonde hair, slicking them to her temples. It wasn't the storm outside that frightened her. It was the dark. She turned blindly, nearly tripping over a decorative stool in the hallway. Her hands fumbled along the smooth walls until she found the staircase, ascending with unsteady steps. At the top, she stumbled into her bedroom, flinging open the drawer of her nightstand. A flashlight, thank God. She flicked the switch. Nothing. Shaking it, she whispered, "Please, please work." A weak glow blinked to life, then faded out completely. "No. No, no," she gasped, falling to her knees. Her fingers tore through the drawer contents, receipts, old pill bottles, pens, useless. Her breathing grew ragged, chest tight, vision blurring. The silence in the house was absolute, but in her mind old sounds resurfaced, a dripping pipe, the creak of wood above her head, the scurry of rats in the dark. She was 14 again, trapped, in a cement basement. No light, no food, no voice. Just 3 days of endless dark and the invisible presence of someone she never saw, only felt. The memory gripped her spine like frost. Claire curled into herself at the edge of her bed, hugging her knees, nails digging into her forearms. For years, she had surrounded herself with light, nightlights in every room, dim lamps that never switched off. A therapist had told her once it was okay to need light, but tonight it had failed her, and the dark had returned like it never left. She crawled to her phone with trembling hands. No more yelling. Her voice came out as a whisper, fragile, raw. "Please, just send someone. I'll pay whatever it takes. Don't leave me here like this." She didn't wait for confirmation. She ended the call and dropped the phone. The outlines of the furniture emerged faintly, vague, distorted shadows like ghosts, watching her. She climbed into bed, pulling the blanket to her chin. Her eyes scanned the void around her, chasing light that didn't exist. Outside, the storm roared on. Inside, there was only silence, and silence for Claire was worse than thunder, worse than lightning, because silence made the memories louder. Each breath was a battle. Each second in the dark felt like a lifetime she didn't choose to relive. She bit down on her lip until the taste of blood grounded her. This was now, not the basement. She repeated fragments of affirmations her therapist had given her, ones that no longer felt convincing but were all she had. "I am safe. I am here. This is not then." A floorboard creaked outside her bedroom door. She froze. No movement followed, just the house settling or maybe breathing. Claire buried her face in the pillow to muffle the sob that slipped through. Somewhere deep inside, the part of her that had built an empire from brokenness, the woman who had clawed her way back to power, whispered, "Hold on, just a little longer. Someone will come." She had begged. She had paid. Someone would come. "Please, let someone come. Let there be light." Daniel Hayes sat at the edge of a worn twin bed, the soft amber glow of a nightlight casting a gentle circle across the room. Emily lay beneath a patchwork blanket, her small chest rising and falling with a quiet, uneven rhythm. She let out a faint cough in her sleep. Daniel winced. He glanced at the clock. 7 a.m. His body ached from a 12-hour shift followed by 2, Side jobs and a busted alternator he barely got running again. Bills were stacked in the kitchen. Rent was overdue. And the hospital still hadn't sent an estimate for the heart surgery Emily desperately needed. His phone buzzed, a sharp vibration in the quiet. He picked it up. Emergency dispatch. Urgent electrical repair. High pay. Beverly Hills. Zip. Immediate. Response requested. Daniel closed his eyes, pressing the heels of his hands against them. He was running on fumes. His legs throbbed. His shoulders burned. But the words, high pay, rang louder than exhaustion. He turned back toward his daughter, brushing a damp curl from her forehead. "I'll be right back," he whispered. She didn't stir. Daniel grabbed his tool bag from the hallway closet and pulled on his raincoat. It had a tear in the left shoulder. The zipper stuck halfway. The rain outside hadn't stopped all night, and by the time he reached his truck, water had already soaked his jeans. The city was empty. Streets flooded in parts. Traffic lights blinked yellow into the void. His headlights bounced off puddles. That looked like shattered glass. 15 minutes later, he pulled up to the wrought iron gate of a mansion so large, it barely revealed itself behind walls of ivy and rain-slicked stone. He double-checked the address. This was it. No one came. Out. He buzzed once, then twice. Finally, the gate creaked open. He drove slowly up the curved driveway, water sheeting over his windshield despite the furious effort of the wipers. At the front door, he knocked. Nothing. He raised his hand to try again, but before his knuckles touched the wood, it opened. Claire stood in the doorway barefoot, a silk robe wrapped tightly around her narrow frame. Her pale hair clung damply to her neck. Her face was washed out, almost translucent under the dim light from the corridor behind her. She looked like someone who hadn't blinked in hours. Her fingers trembled on the doorknob. She opened her mouth slightly, but no words came. Daniel hesitated, unsure if he should speak first. Then, gently, he reached past her and pushed the door open the rest of the way. She flinched, barely, but she didn't move back. Their eyes met. He'd seen tired before. He'd seen worry. But this was something else. This was the look of someone trying not to fall apart in front of a stranger. He nodded once. Not a question, just acknowledgement, then stepped inside. Claire didn't lead him. She simply turned and walked, and Daniel followed through a dim hallway that smelled faintly of lavender and old money. There were no lights, only the occasional flash of lightning revealing glimpses of shadowed artwork, vast ceilings, and silence that pressed in like a fog. He removed his shoes at the entry without being asked. They reached her bedroom. It was enormous. Cathedral ceilings, designer furnishings, and one broken lamp on the nightstand that sat just slightly off-center, as if the room itself had lost balance. He set his bag down quietly, pulled out a small flashlight, and began inspecting the socket. Behind him, Claire stood like a statue, then her hand, cold, trembling, brushed against the sleeve of his jacket. He turned his head slightly. I'm sorry," she whispered. I can't be alone in the dark." Daniel offered a faint, steady smile. "It's all right. I'm right here. You're not alone." He didn't make a show of comfort, just laid his hand lightly over hers, then guided her to the bed, easing her to sit down. From his jacket pocket, he pulled a spare LED light, small but steady. He turned it on and placed it beside her pillow. "Keep this close. I'll have the lamp fixed in no time." Claire clutched the light like a lifeline. Daniel didn't ask questions, not about her name, not about the house, not about the pain that hovered in the corners of her eyes like smoke. He just worked, quiet, efficient, focused. And in that silence, Claire watched, not the work, but the man who, without a single demand, had stepped into her shadows with calm hands and a gentle light. The soft amber glow of the repaired lamp spread slowly across the room, washing away the harshness of the storm outside. Rain still tapped against the tall windows, but the thunder had retreated into the distance, a fading echo. Inside Claire's bedroom, the air held a hush, thin, breakable. Daniel had finished 15 minutes ago. The lamp now cast steady, reliable light. The voltage was balanced, the wiring secured. The job was done, but he hadn't left. He sat quietly in a low armchair near the bed, his tool bag already packed. His hands rested on his knees. He made no movement to rise. His eyes weren't on the lamp. They were on her. Claire sat perched at the edge of the bed, still holding the small flashlight he'd given her, though it no longer served a purpose. Her fingers had gone white around it, and her gaze was fixed on the window. But she wasn't looking at the rain. She was staring beyond it, into some place only she could see. Daniel didn't interrupt. He waited, patient and grounded. Then, softly, he spoke. "Sometimes the darkest places, they don't leave when the lights come back on." The words were quiet. No pressure, no demand. Just a truth. Claire blinked, slowly turning to face him. Her lips parted, unsure if she should speak. But when her voice came, it was brittle and edged in old pain. "Have you ever been trapped somewhere?" Daniel hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he did. "Not the way you mean," he said honestly. "But yeah, I've been trapped. In bills I can't pay, in promises that fell apart, in a crumbling apartment that smells like bleach and rust. Trapped watching my little girl get sicker while I pretend we're just waiting on a regular doctor's visit." He exhaled. "So, yeah, I know what it feels like when there's no light at the end of the hallway." Claire didn't reply right away. Her grip on the flashlight tightened, her jaw clenched. Then she inhaled slowly and said something she hadn't spoken aloud in nearly 20 years. "I was 14. Daniel didn't move." Claire's voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I was walking home from school. It was autumn, leaves on the ground. I remember that part. I heard a car pull up behind me. I didn't see the man's face. He pushed me into the van. Drove for hours." She swallowed hard. No windows, no sound. Just me and the hum of the engine. He put me in a basement, concrete walls, a leaking pipe, no light. I stopped screaming after the first night. She blinked several times, her eyes brimming. I think it was 3 days, maybe more. When they found me, I hadn't spoken in almost a full day. I didn't even cry. I just stopped. Daniel didn't react like others had. No horror, no awkward reassurances, no misplaced sympathy. Just presence. Quiet, steady, real. He stood slowly, walked to the small kitchenette in the corner of the suite, and returned a moment later with a fresh cup of tea. Steam curled gently from the rim. He set it down on her nightstand. "This one's hot," he said simply. Claire looked at the tea, then at him. Something inside her shifted, not shattered. Just moved like the first breath after being underwater too long. She picked up the cup with both hands, holding it close like it was fragile. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded once. No reply was needed. But in that tiny moment, Claire felt something that therapy, money, and walls of light had never given her. She wasn't alone, not anymore. The light on Claire's nightstand glowed soft and golden, casting gentle shadows that danced across the ceiling. The storm outside had settled into a steady rhythm, less rage, more lullaby. Still, Claire hadn't moved from her spot on the bed. She sat curled with the teacup between her palms, its warmth grounding her in a way she couldn't explain. Daniel remained in the armchair, quiet, unintrusive, but unmistakably there. She hadn't asked him to stay. He hadn't said he would, and yet he hadn't left. The silence stretched between them again, no longer tense but contemplative. Claire took a sip from the cup, the chamomile floral and earthy. It was the first real thing she had tasted all day. Across from her, Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice, when it came, was calm and low. "You don't have to keep telling me more. Just, if it helps, I'm listening." Claire glanced up. His face wasn't pitiful. He wasn't asking for her pain as payment. He was simply offering presence. So, she spoke, not all at once, in pieces. "After they found me, I was never the same," she said. Therapists said I had a dissociative response, that I compartmentalized, built walls. Her lips quirked humorlessly. They didn't realize I was building a fortress. Daniel said nothing, just listened. I used to think success would fix it. If I controlled everything, my schedule, my money, my space, then nothing could hurt me again. She looked down. But it's a lie. One flicker of a light and I'm 14 again, crawling into corners, holding my breath in the dark. Daniel's eyes softened. I get it, he said. Not the same way. But there are nights I sit on the floor beside my daughter's bed and stare at the ceiling, praying nothing goes wrong. Praying I don't lose her because I couldn't earn enough or beg hard enough. And still, I can't sleep. Claire looked at him. For the first time, she saw not a stranger in work boots and a rain-soaked jacket, but a man carrying more than his share of quiet pain. What's her name? She asked. Emily, he replied. She's 6. Heart condition. I'm doing my best. Claire nodded slowly. She's lucky to have you. Daniel gave the faintest smile. I think I'm the lucky one. The room fell into stillness again, the kind that didn't ache. Claire finished her tea. The flashlight Daniel had given her earlier still lay beside the pillow. She reached for it, turning it over in her hand. Silly, isn't it? She murmured. A grown woman afraid of the dark. No, Daniel said gently. It's never silly to survive. She looked at him again, eyes glassy. You're the first person who's ever said that to me. Daniel stood then, not abruptly, just purposefully. He moved to the side of the bed and lifted the edge of the blanket, offering a silent gesture. Claire hesitated, then lay down, slowly. She pulled the blanket over herself and turned toward him. He adjusted the lamp just slightly so the glow curved toward her like a protective barrier. He didn't touch her, didn't speak more than needed, just made sure she was safe. And then he sat back in the chair and waited, not to fix her, not to rescue her, just to be there in the dark if she needed someone to stay. Claire's eyes fluttered shut. For the first time in years, she didn't flinch at the thought of sleep, not because the room was lit, but because someone was still sitting in the quiet, just in case the light went out again. 3 nights later, the rain returned, softer this time, a gentle percussion on the leaves, as if the storm was remembering how to be kind. Daniel was cleaning out the clogged gutters behind his apartment, sleeves rolled up, arms slick with grime, when his phone rang. He wiped his hands on his jeans and checked the screen. The name surprised him. Claire Whitmore. He hadn't expected to hear from her again. Claire, he answered, voice cautious but warm. There was a small pause on the other end, then her voice, softer. Then he remembered, emerged. Hi, sorry to bother you again. I think another light's acting up. The one in the kitchen. Daniel looked toward the dark sky, then back to his tools. I can be there in an hour. When he arrived, the gates were already open, the driveway lined with small lanterns, glowing like stars. The house looked the same, towering and pristine, but something in the air felt different, less guarded, more welcoming. Claire opened the door before he knocked. She wasn't in a silk robe this time. She wore jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and bare feet. Her hair was down, soft waves falling over her shoulders. Her face looked clearer, less pale. Come in, she said with a small smile. And you don't have to take your shoes off this time. Daniel stepped inside. She led him to the kitchen. The light above the island was glowing perfectly. He looked at it, then at her. It's working fine. Claire bit her lip, then gave a small sheepish shrug. I know, I guess I wanted some company. Daniel set his bag down on the counter, leaning casually against the edge. Well, he said, this might be the nicest fake repair call I've ever received. She laughed softly, surprised by the sound of it herself. They moved into the living room. Claire brought out 2 cups of tea and placed them on the low table between them. I tried to cook, she said, motioning to the dining room behind them. It's just pasta, nothing fancy. I followed a YouTube video. It promised to be idiot-proof. You're already ahead of me, Daniel replied. Last time I tried a recipe from YouTube, I set off the smoke alarm and traumatized my daughter. They sat down at the long dining table. The lights were dim, and outside, the rain traced silver lines down the windows. The pasta was slightly overcooked, but Daniel didn't say a word. Instead, he asked her about the house, her favorite books, if she had always lived alone. Claire answered slowly in fragments. Bits of herself that had long been sealed away began to surface again, hesitantly but willingly. She told him she hadn't slept with the lights off in almost 2 decades. Daniel nodded, listening. Then he told her about Emily. Some nights, he said, his voice low, roughening slightly, she looks up at me and asks, "Daddy, am I going to die?" And I have no idea how to answer that without scaring her more than the truth already does. Claire set her fork down, her eyes fixed on his. "I'm sorry," she said, but this time, it wasn't pity, it was understanding. After dinner, they returned to the living room. Claire poured them each a glass of wine. Daniel pulled out his phone and found a soft piano playlist. Music played from a speaker in the corner, notes floating like feathers through the air. Claire closed her eyes for a moment. "I used to play this," she murmured, "before everything went dark." Daniel looked at her then, not with curiosity, but with quiet respect, the kind of look that said, "I hear you." She turned toward him fully, her voice faint. "You know, everyone thinks I'm cold, untouchable. Even the people I've let close. But really, I'm just tired of hurting people, or being hurt." Daniel leaned back, eyes steady. Sometimes being alone feels safer than hoping someone might stay. She looked down, then smiled. Not a forced one, not one of habit, a real one, small and unguarded. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said, "but not in the way people usually mean." "I get it," Daniel said. "I'm not here to fix you, Claire." She nodded. "Good. Because I'm not broken. I'm just figuring out how to live again." And for the first time in a very long time, she laughed again. Not politely, not nervously, genuinely. It rose from somewhere deep inside her, something fragile and still healing. Daniel didn't say a word. He just watched her with quiet warmth, and in that moment, Claire felt it clearly. He wasn't there out of obligation. He stayed because he wanted to. The next afternoon, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Claire's living room. The storm had passed, leaving the garden damp and glistening. Claire sat at the counter sipping coffee while Daniel stood at the sink, fiddling with the faucet that had started to leak overnight. Their morning had been quiet, comfortable, filled with soft glances, easy silences, and something tender that neither had named. Then the doorbell rang. Claire hesitated before rising to answer. When she opened the front door, a man in his late 30s leaned against the frame, dressed in a sleek blazer and wearing too much cologne. His smile was thin, practiced, and held the faintest edge of mockery. "Well, if it isn't Cousin Claire," he said. "Still living in your glass tower, I see." Claire's expression stiffened instantly. "Scott, missed me?" he asked, brushing past her without waiting for an invitation. His cologne lingered in the air like an unwanted memory. Her instinct was to block his view, but it was too late. His eyes swept across the space until they landed on Daniel, walking down the hallway with a wrench in hand. Scott's eyebrows lifted. "Ah, so this is the handyman I've heard about. A little younger than I expected." Claire's jaw tightened. "He's helping with a faucet." Scott chuckled, glancing around the house with a condescending smirk. "Helping with the plumbing now, huh? Is that what we're calling it these days?" "Don't," Claire warned, her voice low, but Scott wasn't listening. He wandered into the kitchen, eyeing Daniel with thinly veiled disdain. "You always did have a soft spot for broken things, Claire. Guess that's why you kept me around so long before tossing me out." The words landed like glass shattering in her chest. Years ago, she'd trusted Scott with her finances while recovering from a health scare. He'd drained tens of thousands from her accounts before disappearing. When she pressed charges, the family had turned on her. Now, here he was, same smirk, same games. Daniel stepped into the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, calmly setting down the wrench. He didn't look at Scott. He looked at Claire, and he understood, without asking. "I can finish the faucet next time," he said, already placing his tools back into his bag. Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, to stop him, but no words came, not with Scott watching. "It's okay," Daniel said gently, offering her a small smile. "Maybe next time." Then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. But to Claire it echoed like a slammed gate, one she didn't know how to open again. Scott wandered to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a drink like he owned the place. "Still drinking the expensive stuff, I see. Glad to know you haven't changed." But Claire wasn't listening. She stood frozen, staring at the door Daniel had just walked through. Scott's words hadn't been cruel. They hadn't needed to be. Just a few careless jabs, and the shame came rushing back. She had let someone in, someone who saw her, and she let him leave without defending what they were becoming. Because deep down, she didn't believe anyone would stay if they saw her whole. Truth. She walked past Scott in silence, climbed the stairs, and shut herself in her bedroom. The little flashlight Daniel had once given her still sat on the nightstand. She picked it up, turned it on, and watched the soft circle of light push back the shadows. She curled beneath her blanket, the flashlight resting beside her, and for the first time since she was a girl, she whispered into the quiet, "What if I pushed away the only person who ever stayed without asking for anything in return?" The envelope sat untouched on Claire's desk for hours. It bore the letterhead of St. Beatrice Children's Clinic, printed in sterile blue ink and addressed to her under a corporate alias she rarely used. Her fingers hovered above it, hesitant. But eventually she peeled it open. Inside, medical documentation, diagnosis, risk analysis, a name, Emily Hayes, age 6, congenital heart defect, high risk, requires surgery within 2 months. Attached was a photograph, a little girl with large eyes and a too pale smile. She clutched a balloon shaped like a heart, its string wound around her tiny wrist. Claire's throat tightened. Daniel had never asked for help. He hadn't hinted, hadn't begged. But she remembered his voice, roughened and raw. "She asks me if she's going to die, and I don't know what to tell her." Claire didn't need time to think. She picked up her phone and called the hospital's administrator directly. She didn't use her real name. Instead, she created a pseudonym on the spot, Grace Fielding. She requested immediate coverage of all expenses, pre-op, surgery, recovery, post-op medications, everything. When asked if she wanted her identity shared with the family, she simply said, "No, never." 3 weeks later, the surgery took place. Daniel sat alone in the hospital waiting room in jeans worn at the knees and a flannel shirt that didn't quite keep out the cold. Every minute felt like a year. His hands trembled, folded tight in prayer, but he didn't believe in anything anymore except Emily's breath. When the surgeon finally stepped out and gave a small nod, Daniel collapsed into a chair, head in his hands, tears breaking loose before he could stop them. He was still crying when they led him into her recovery room. Emily lay still, pale but breathing easily. Machines beeped their mechanical lullabies. Her chest rose and fell in a rhythm Daniel had never been so grateful to witness. He dropped to his knees beside her bed, pressed a kiss to her fingers, and whispered, "You made it, baby. You made it." A nurse entered with a file of post-op documents. Inside, on a single sheet, was a note. All expenses covered by donor. Grace Fielding. Daniel furrowed his brow. "Who's Grace Fielding?" The nurse shrugged. "No contact info. Just showed up. Paid for everything." He stared at the name, the mystery of it. Tears welled again. He held Emily tighter than ever before. Down the hallway, behind a one-way observation window, Claire stood alone. She wore a simple coat, sunglasses, and no makeup. No assistant trailed behind her. She wasn't there as the CEO of anything. Just a woman standing quietly in the shadows, watching a father hold his daughter like she was the most sacred thing on earth. She didn't need to go in. She didn't need him to know. It was enough to know Emily was alive. That Daniel no longer had to choose between groceries and hope. Her chest rose and fell with the weight of it all. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She smiled. A small, honest smile, not the one she wore for press interviews or boardrooms. This smile was human. She reached out and placed her hand gently against the glass. Not to be seen, not to be thanked, but to reach for something she had no words for yet. She stayed until the sun broke over the hills, casting warm light into the recovery room. Then, without a sound, she turned and walked away. The letter arrived, in a plain white envelope. No return address, no logo. Just her name, handwritten in simple, clean print across the front. Claire Whitmore. She found it on the kitchen counter the next morning, tucked beneath a copy of the newspaper she hadn't opened yet. For a moment, she just stared at it, unmoving. Then she peeled it open, unfolded the page, and read. My daughter's heart beats because someone believed I was worth saving. If you ever need to hear the same, know that you are. Claire's hand trembled as she held the letter to her chest. Her throat tightened, vision blurring. The handwriting was unmistakably his, neat, direct, no embellishment. Just truth. She read the words again, slower this time. Not a confession, not a request, just belief, offered freely. She wiped her eyes and reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over his contact name before she pressed the call button. It rang, twice. When Daniel answered, his voice was soft. Hey. She didn't speak right away. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her chest. When they finally came out, they were steady. Hi. There was a pause. She stepped outside, barefoot, onto the stone porch. The morning was cool, the sky pale. She nodded toward the garden, even though he couldn't see her. Come with me, she said. An hour later, they stood side by side in the dew-soaked grass. The earth felt alive beneath their feet, like something beginning again. Claire took a breath. There's still a lot of darkness in me, she admitted. But maybe we can light it together. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, fully, steadily. Then he reached out and took her hand in his. For the first time skin to skin, warm and real, she didn't flinch. The rain started to fall again, not a storm this time, just a soft cleansing drizzle that kissed her cheeks and settled in her hair. Claire tilted her head to the sky and let it touch her, let it remind her she was still healing. Daniel's grip tightened gently, and neither of them let go. 1 year later, spring returned. The garden behind Claire's home had bloomed into life. Soft white blossoms curled around thick vines, and string lights hung like stars between the trees, gently swaying in the breeze. The air was sweet with new leaves and the hum of renewal. Daniel stood on a ladder adjusting one of the bulbs above the patio. He wore a plain gray t-shirt, his sleeves pushed up, arms speckled with dust and pollen. Below him, Emily danced barefoot. In the grass, cheeks flushed with joy, her laugh ringing out like music. "Mommy Claire," she called, holding up a leaf with a perfect heart shape pressed into it. "Look what I found." Claire sat on a wooden bench near the edge of the garden, a small portable piano resting on her lap. Her fingers hovered above the keys, then gently began to play a tune, halting at first, then smooth and slow. She hadn't touched an instrument in years. She looked up and smiled, sunlight warming her face. "It's beautiful, just like you." Emily beamed and ran into her arms. Claire hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, lavender and fresh-cut grass. Daniel joined them, hopping down from the ladder with a soft grunt. He walked over, wrapping his arms around both of them from behind. Claire leaned back into his chest. He rested his chin lightly on her shoulder. "You gave my daughter a new heart," he whispered, his voice thick with feeling. Claire looked up at him, eyes soft. And you gave me one too. She turned to Emily, who was now twirling in circles, arms outstretched. I lost a daughter once, Claire said quietly. I never thought I'd get another chance. Daniel nodded. Emily skipped back to them and climbed into Claire's lap without hesitation. Her small arms wrapped around Claire's waist. I love you, Mommy Claire, she whispered. Claire's breath caught. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, tears came not from fear or grief, but from overwhelming joy. She kissed Emily's forehead, holding her close. Daniel knelt beside them, one arm around Claire, the other around Emily. They sat there together, wrapped in the simple warmth of a family not born from blood, but from choice. The evening settled in slowly, painting the sky in streaks of rose and gold. A gentle breeze rustled the trees. The soft bulbs overhead flickered to life, casting their quiet glow across the patio and the garden beyond. Claire tilted her face upward, letting the wind kiss her cheeks. No fear, no walls, just peace. Emily rested her head on Claire's shoulder. Daniel took Claire's hand. Their fingers intertwined effortlessly, like they'd always belonged that way. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The garden glowed around them, and for the first time, Claire understood what it meant to not just be safe, but to be whole. The rain came again, soft and silver, as the last light of evening faded behind the hills. It tapped gently on the windows, slipped between the petals in the garden, and pooled on the stone patio where 3 figures sat beneath a canopy of glowing string lights. Claire leaned her head back, eyes closed, letting the droplets land on her skin. She didn't move to cover herself. She didn't shiver or shrink away. Let it fall, she thought. Let it cleanse. Beside her, Emily lay curled against her side, wrapped in a blanket, her small breaths steady and safe. Daniel sat on her other side, his arm draped behind her shoulders, fingers lightly tracing the curve of her neck. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered was already here. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet grass and spring blossoms. The lights above glowed steady, their gentle warmth haloing the space around them in golden hues. Claire looked at Emily, then at Daniel, then at the garden, blooming, alive, home, and her heart didn't clench this time. It opened. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and handed Claire a small folded note. She looked at him, puzzled, then unfolded it. You never needed to be perfect. You only needed someone who stayed. She blinked slowly, her breath catching at the simple truth wrapped in those words. He smiled. Not the cautious smile of someone testing limits, but the quiet, certain smile of someone who had chosen her. Claire looked out over the grass where the rain fell like a whisper and the lights held steady. She thought back to that night, the storm, the darkness, the fear, and the man who stepped inside her. Shadows with nothing but a flashlight and quiet grace. Her voice rose, almost to herself, soft but unwavering. He came to fix a light, but what he lit up was my whole world. She reached for Daniel's hand, their fingers lacing together again. Across her lap, Emily stirred and sighed in her sleep, safe in the space between them. And as the camera of life pulled back, beyond, the glowing garden, the laughter, the rain, the world kept turning. But in one quiet corner, under a canopy of light, love had taken root where only silence once lived.